Hello, everybody. Welcome to bed. Climb on in with me, cuddle up, and, well, don't really do that. Just sort of stay by the side of the bed, and, you know, you can hear me from there. So don't don't get on the bed with me. Honestly, I don't want you here. Nothing personal. I just need my space. But sit at the foot of my bed. Sit at the edge of my bed, and we'll have a little conversation. Um, I wanted to share with you all my thoughts about this show that I've been watching a little bit of, and it's called Occupied. It's um, it's a Norwegian show, and it's uh, set in, I suppose, either the near future or maybe an alternate present. It's kind of hard to say, but the scenario is that it's set in a Europe in which America has pulled out of NATO. America has become uh, energy independent and has no need to be uh, as a part of NATO. It has no need to be pushing towards the Russian border and doing all the things that it's doing right now. It's NATO, but let's face it, it's the United States that's spearheading the NATO push uh, eastward towards the borders of Russia, which is generally what has ignited this whole mess that we've got going on in the Balkans right now, specifically in Ukraine. Um, so the world of this show Occupied is a world in which the United States uh, has just decided to be isolationist, and in this world, in this alternate future, or alternate present, or near future, whatever it is, a complicated set of circumstances has brought things to a boil. The I don't want to get too boring in the whole setup here. Maybe I'm already boring. I don't know, but let me just try to be as brief about it as I possibly can. The party that's in charge is, I guess, like a green type party, and they claim that they've found this new way of making fuel that does not rely on oil, and so fossil fuels can go by the wayside, and you've got this new kind of energy production called thorium, and they've learned how to create energy from thorium, and it's renewable, and so there's all this stuff about climate change and all that, but I don't think we need to bring all that mess into the picture necessarily. I think it's a load of hooey. But I think you don't really have to believe in it. You can say, just we're running out of fossil fuels. That's a problem. Renewable energy would be a good thing to have, and so the the PM of the Green Party that's in charge in Norway says we're going to freeze production of all oil and natural gas and so forth, and we're going to start producing this new kind of energy. And we'd like to lead by example and get everybody else to follow our lead, so that we can have a cleaner and better world, and fueled by renewable energy instead of by the fossil fuels that pollute, that lead to pollution, and that also are non-renewable. There's only a finite amount that we can get from the earth. Well, Turns out the EU doesn't doesn't care for this unilateral decision on the part of the Norwegian PM to take this stance. And so, what happens? Well, the EU uh, works in cahoots with Russia, and the Russians literally come and kidnap the prime minister. And this is all in the first episode. They kidnap the prime minister, rough him up, say, hey, you're not going to do this. You're going to change. You're going to change what you're doing here, and so they're able to get him back. He does come back, but when he comes back, he realizes he's in a pickle because the EU has resorted to this extreme uh, decision to essentially use the Russians as proxy to make Denmark start. Not Denmark, to make Norway start, with their oil production again, because they need the oil in the rest of Europe. And so the prime minister just bows to expediency and basically says, "Okay, we'll do that, and we accept the Russians as our partners in getting the oil factories set up and everything, and we'll let that happen for 10 years, but then we're going to start introducing our own alternative fuel." Anyway, so that's sort of complicated setup for the whole thing, and what follows is just sort of a slow infiltration of the country of Norway by Russia. They get in a little bit, and then a little bit more, and then a little bit more, and then there starts to be some certain native groups want to push the Russians out, and they resort to terrorism, and then the Russians are even more in than they ever were before, and there's more and more of a Russian presence in Norway, and it sort of goes on like that. There's lots of different story threads. It's kind of a soap opera, you know. It's kind of a see what will happen next. What will happen next? Tune in for the next episode to find out what outrageous things are going to next take place. Which gets that whole kind of I don't know. I find that whole pitch to be a little bit tedious, but it's well done enough. It's well acted, and an interesting enough scenario that I was actually involved in it. I was actually interested, and it seemed at first to be even somewhat even-handed, showing that there were good people and bad people on both sides of this conflict, and that there were, and that there were no easy answers, and even though the whole premise of the European Union, of which Norway is not a part. Norway's out of the European Union, as far as I understand it. That's what I've read somewhere. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. It's not my it's not my speciality, but that they worked in cahoots with Russia and got Russian muscle, Russian might to come in and threaten them because they didn't like what they were doing with this renewable fuel, and just freezing production on oil and everything. I mean, But from that point onward, it seemed like it was handling this kind of possible scenario, this sort of science fiction, but not that much science fiction, just sort of speculative fiction scenario, in a kind of interesting way. But as the season went on, as the season progressed, first season one, I got to about the final episode of season one. I think there are two more seasons after that. And it was more and more clear that the Russians were the baddies, in every way. That the ways in which we thought it was ambiguous, they were it was not actually not ambiguous. And there's this this sexy bitch ambassador for the Russian side, uh, which is kind of an interesting character. That's kind of ice queen, gorgeous blonde, uh, uh, but who's kind of a dragon lady, kind of ruthless and merciless. You know, it's so stereotypical. I mean, it really is interesting how, in an age like our own where people think, especially, enlightened people like, the ones in entertainment, they think that they're above. Oh, we would never make Gone with the Wind today because those kinds of stereotypes are just so, those kinds of racial stereotypes are just so offensive. But they indulge in they indulge freely in the stereotype of Russians as cutthroat and savage and untrustworthy, morally slippery. All of the Cold War stuff, the it's all back with a vengeance here in this show. And so by the time season one wrapped up, I kind of had lost interest in the show, just because the political propaganda aspect of it was becoming so apparent. Now I went back and looked and did some research on when the show was made, and it turns out it was actually put out. The first season came out, I think, in 2015 or maybe 2016. So it was right after, the initial troubles in Ukraine in 2014. And it seemed like it was right when the new Cold War was really heating up. And, the Russians moved into Crimea, and which had always, I guess, or not always, but which had long historically been theirs. But of course, it was seen as an aggressive, hostile move. Uh, of course, what happened in Ukraine with the Maidan stuff was not seen in that way. But without getting into all of that controversy, even though I've tipped my hand here as far as how I feel about all that stuff, um, it became clear to me that this was a propagandistic piece, um, and it was disappointing because I mean I could handle a situation where the Russians are the bad guys, but I was finding it more interesting when there was ambiguity, when, because things are usually not totally black and white, and so when they were moving in the direction of making the Russians more and more sinister, and also something else that this show pushes hard, which I found curious, was this whole, it's a betrayal for America to be energy independent, to be, non-interventionist, and they really push this notion hard because at some point the the embattled prime minister who at some, he's alienated everybody because he's in this impossible position where he has to appease the Russians, but he has to also be true to his base, and and so he just ends up making everybody angry with him, and the only place where he can be safe is in the American embassy, and so we see this vision of this depiction of an American embassy in this world where the United States has opted not to be involved in NATO, and it's sort of like he's trying to get the Americans involved. He's trying to say this: we need your help. You need to come. Can you please come to our aid? We can't fight the Russians on our own. Uh, they're they are were no match for their military might, and so forth. And the Russian, I mean, I'm sorry, the people in the American embassy are just sort of like, sorry, man, it's not our fight, and it's depicted as as a like a, oh, this would be such a terrible thing if that were to happen, if America were to decide, if you know, America, the aggressively expansionist foreign policy of America, allied with NATO, if that somehow was reversed, what a dystopian world this would be, and like that was the message they were trying to drive home in this episode. I don't know if was there any fear of that actually happening. I guess maybe in 2015, 2016, they thought maybe if Trump won, that he would pull America out of NATO. I mean, that didn't end up happening, did it? We sure didn't see that happen. The foreign policy establishment is, they're obviously much more powerful than the executive branch. Either that or the executive branch didn't really care that much. But I don't know if that was part of what informed the making of this show. But when it became clear that it was propaganda, I began to wonder. I began to see fingerprints of like who's really involved here. Who really wrote this? Who's putting this out, and for what reason, for what ends. It became impossible to just see it as entertainment anymore. So I've stalled in my watching of the show, even though I have to say, it's well made and the acting is really good, and it's interesting to see. It's an interesting scenario and setup, but it becomes less interesting when the ambiguity ceases. I think the ambiguity is what made it interesting to me in the first place. Um, Let me think what else I can say about it. So, if anyone else has seen this show, or if you're interested, if you still have Netflix, if you haven't dropped Netflix, and like a lot of very principled people have, but but not me. I still have mine. So think what you want about me, I guess. For that, but uh, I'd be very interested in what anybody else has to say, and if I'm missing anything here. Uh, it's I suppose more. They would say it's more relevant than ever now, right? The anti-Russian people who run our foreign policy, the neocons and neolibs. That's what they would claim. Um, but I don't know. Those are my thoughts on the show. Anybody else who's seen it or has thoughts about it, please leave your comments below. And thanks for watching.